Welcome to the Positive Spiritual Living Podcast, brought to you by Unity on the Bay. This is your positive path for spiritual living.
Did you know that there is a spiritual liberation taking place on this planet right now? And don't you know that there are a number of individuals that are receiving the inspiration to step up and serve as spokespersons for the universal spirit of truth that is now permeating the consciousness of people everywhere? And we are so blessed this morning to have one such individual with us. He's a nationally known speaker and author of the book, A New Way to Be Human, 7 Spiritual Pathways to Becoming Fully Alive. And that book, by the way, is available in the Source bookstore. And Robert will be there after the service today to sign copies, so I hope that you'll stop by and visit him and receive a copy of that book. He blogs for the Huffington Post, one of my favorite publications, and he's commentator for Fox News. He chairs the Desmond Tutu Peace Foundation in New York City, and he lives in Seattle on a farm in rural eastern Washington. We're so honored to have him with us today. Please join me in giving a warm Unity on the Bay welcome to Robert V. Taylor.
Wow, thank you. It is wonderful to be with you this morning. Good morning, Unity on the Bay.
Good morning.
I think we can do a little better than that. Good morning, Unity on the Bay.
Good morning.
Thank you. I just want to say to Pastor Chris, your generosity in having me here is wonderful. Thank you. And to the members of your team who I have worked with, Pastor Elizabeth, Lourdes, Diana, Angie, and Anna, and I'm probably leaving a few out. Thank you for such wonderful hospitality and care in the process of just making this all happen. After I'd been in Seattle for about a year or two, I was introduced at a large public event by someone who was not a great fan of mine as the Buddhist Episcopalian, and he said it with a bit of to his voice. Well, I'd never been introduced that way before, and I thought about it, and I thought, I really like that. And then a little time later, I was at another event, and I was introduced as the Buddhist, Episcopal, Jewish person. And I thought, I'm liking this even better. And then probably about 5 years ago, I was introduced as the Buddhist, Jewish, Hindu Episcopalian. And I thought, wow, the universe is teaching me something. God is certainly not a Christian. And I said, amen. And then, after I started speaking in some Unity churches, I was introduced as the Buddhist, Jewish, Hindu, Unity Episcopalian. And so I wear all of that with a great badge of honor and really come to you in the spirit of those introductions, because I think they strike a chord in our hearts about the wisdom of the universe, of the Holy One, who we might call by the name of God, or of eternal love. So do you love part of your story? Raise your hand if you do. Keep your hand up. Do you like more than part of your story? You can put your hand down now. Because I don't think you're going to have enough hands for this. Do you love your story as it is, in all of its fullness? Yes. And so I am filled with a heart full of gratitude if you are able to say yes to that. I am filled with a heart full of gratitude if you are on the journey to being able to say that. And I am filled with a heart full of gratitude for whatever it is about your story that you love today. But today, I want to talk about loving your story in all of its fullness, not just today, but every day, and talk about some tools for actually doing that as part of the practice of your daily life. I want to begin, though, by telling you a story from Valentine's Day. My spouse surprised me with a card a few days before the holiday, and I opened the red envelope, and inside was this card with a cover filled with an array of colorful hearts, and emblazoned across the front of it, it said, "I love you." And I thought, after so many years together, how sweet. And my heart fluttered. And I was looking at it, and I thought, well, I got to open the card. And I said, I bet there's some really sweet, more fuller expression of love written inside. And instead, I found these words, "In spite of yourself." I don't think he's ever going to live that one down. Only a spouse could get away with that. But on some level, isn't that our journey? To love ourselves in spite of, but also because of ourselves. In the passage from Ephesians, we're invited to be imitators of the Holy One and to live in love. And we're promised in that passage that as we do that and become bearers of love in the world, that our lives are like a fragrant offering. I love that image. If there is to be a day of accounting for our lives, I believe that there is only one question that we will ever be asked. The only question that matters. Did you love with abandonment? If we are imitators of the Holy One, who is love, then we who are made in the imagination of love are invited to celebrate our belovedness. I want to tell you that as I'm on the road and in emails that I get from people and messages I receive on Facebook, the most persistent and common question that I get from folks is, how do I love myself? So why is this so difficult for so many of us in different ways and at different seasons and moments on our journey? I want you to think today about your story and what it reveals. I believe that your story reveals wisdom and ancient truth. That the inner guru who lives within you, the divine who is present in you, yearns for us to be lovers. Lovers of our own story that connects us with other people in surprising and unexpected ways. And lovers who discover in that circle of oneness that the universe blesses and celebrates your story. Over 30 years ago, I made a decision that rather than serve in the South African military, which enforced the system of racial violence and hatred known as apartheid, that I would accept the option of not serving, which was to go to jail for life. And so I went to see Desmond Tutu, the anti-apartheid activist and to-be Nobel Peace Prize laureate. I went to see him to ask for his wisdom on how to survive imprisonment, because I wasn't sure that I would come out of it alive. He asked me a life-shifting question. He said, "Robert, tell me about your life. Not what you've done, but who you are." No one had ever asked me such a question before. And most of us are used to expecting the inevitable question from someone we meet for the first time, "Tell me what you do." Just think of the last time you were asked that, or that you asked that of another person. And we typically have a 1 or 2 sentence quick answer to give, because we know that often people don't really have time to engage. When you can respond to "tell me who you are," a dramatic shift happens in your engagement with other people, with your own story, with your life, and with the holy. Now, I was a 22-year-old, privileged white kid at the time, in the presence of a 49-year-old, internationally known human rights activist who was an incredible, iconic, and inspiring figure to me. I was honored to be in his presence, and my nervousness about being in his presence quickly gave way to being floored by his unexpected question. As I told him about the physical pain that had transformed my life during 2 spinal surgeries as a teenager, I wondered why I was intuitively telling him those details in response to his question. I spoke about the loneliness and the fears of being hospitalized, flat on my back, not able to move for 6 weeks each time. I told him about the loneliness and the fears of being in a hospital where visiting time was limited to 30 minutes a day, and in a country in which there was no television. So no distractions. I related how a book I had read and reread had upended my life. It was a book by a man named Trevor Huddleston, who wrote about this remarkable community he served, a multi-ethnic, multicultural place outside of Johannesburg that had been bulldozed by the government for precisely those qualities that made it so vibrant and alive. It didn't fit with the apartheid plan of separating people and enclosing them from one another. I described Huddleston's book as my first conscious awakening to the realities of my country and as an invitation to become involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And then I said to Tutu that Huddleston had been like a constant visitor to me in the hospital. And as I said those words, he burst out laughing. Now, I wondered what on earth I had said. And after he settled down, he told me about the loneliness and fears he had experienced as a teenager in the hospital being treated for tuberculosis. And then he said to me, "Robert, Trevor Huddleston was my pastor. He used to come and visit me every day and read stories to me. He inspired me to think about doing what I do." In that moment, I realized how profound Tutu's simple question was, "Tell me who you are," is an invitation to discover who we are in oneness with others, revealed through surprising connecting stories. It's why the question matters for the sake of our own well-being and the well-being of the human family and of the universe. On the surface, anyone might have assumed that there would not be a common thread connecting our lives. Yet his question revealed this shared transformation decades apart. And on this new common ground, he said to me, "Robert, there will be a time when young men like you need to go to jail for refusing to serve, but this is not that time." And we had 10 days until I was due to be imprisoned. He said, "Go back home to Cape Town and wait for my call." The next day he called and said, "There is a family in New York City who is willing to welcome you." And 9 days later, I was on a flight to New York. So, how will you respond to the question of, "Tell me who you are"? I want to suggest to you that your response is part of the pathway of loving your story in all of its fullness, not just in this moment, in this place right now, not just today, not just tomorrow, but each and every day of your life. It is part of the journey of what that passage from Ephesians points to, living in love. And I want to suggest to you 3 tools for doing so. The first one is own the fullness of your story. When we're mindfully aware of the arc of our story, it becomes an invitation to see the many threads of it woven together. And instead of banishing the painful or the fearful experiences to a closet, choose a trusted guide or mentor to be authentic with, or find an intimate spiritual group where that is possible. Tell your stories in a safe environment and listen with expectancy as you tell them for what they are revealing to you. Your own courage in doing this will become a mirror of love to yourself. The fear and the loneliness and the physical boundaries of the spinal surgeries could have handicapped my view of myself. I could have chosen to live with anger or pity or resentment or any number of things, but instead it offered me the gift of compassion and empathy towards others. And instead of youthful invincibility about myself and my body, it reminded me of the frailty and preciousness and the marvel of the human body. And it served as a reminder that each day needed to be embraced and to be lived in the moment. Now, many of us prefer to focus on the joyous and the happy and the wondrous parts of our lives. And yet I think we know that it's usually in the challenging parts of our journey that we find new light shed on how we choose to live with gratitude and delight and love. Second, listen with curiosity. Like the ever-expanding, ever-creating universe, your story is never static. And by that, I don't mean that the storyline necessarily changes as you tell things from the past. But it is ever expanding in the sense that as you tell it, new insights and wisdom are revealed in each new season of your life. Instead of living and keeping separate those parts of regret and shame and embarrassment about some part of your story, find ways in your curiosity to integrate them into the fullness. Because when you do that, you begin to develop tenderness, compassion, and love for yourself. You are no longer being a monster to yourself. And when that happens, you cannot help but yearn to listen to the stories of others and to what wisdom and truth they reveal. And you do so from a place of curiosity that is filled with tenderness and compassion for whatever is in their story. The third thing that I would suggest to you is cultivate awe. There have been several studies over the last few years revealing that our capacity for awe expands our sense of fulfillment, of meaning, of satisfaction, of our perception of time and how we use it, and our perception of purpose. When I experience awe in nature, perhaps in art or music, or in a piece of soaring architecture, I am awake to being part of the grandeur of life that is so much bigger than my story. And similarly, I love nothing more than hearing the stories of others because they fill me with awe and amazement. I discover lives of courage and hope filled with seemingly simple and small acts of compassion and mercy and joy. And they leave me breathless. If I'm ever tempted to view my life as a series of obligations or something whose course is set for all time, the stories of those who know who they are always pull me back to the center of my grounding. Instead, my awe becomes expressed as gratitude for the abundant generosity that their stories and lives point me to. And then I'm able to once again begin to name and to claim the awe that my own story reveals to me. So I would say to you today, I would invite you to think about the stories that shape and frame the course of your journey and what they reveal. And I want to end with an example of what I mean. When I was a very little kid, my dad would take me on Saturday fishing trips, and we would take the train to the end of the line in Cape Town. And we'd get off, we'd go clambering over rocks, carrying our fishing gear and our packed lunches to find the best spot to fish. And when our day was over, I could not wait to tell anyone who would listen about my exciting day of being with my dad fishing. When I was a teenager, my dad and I continued to go fishing together. But you know, when you're a teenager, it's not quite as cool to be that excited about spending time with your dad. And so I would tell the story in a slightly different way. I was aware, though, that I loathed the part of having to kill the fish. And I was aware that my dad never made me do that. In my 30s, I would tell people about those fishing trips from my youth. But they revealed something to me about my dad's kindness and generosity for never humiliating or degrading me or calling me the dreaded sissy for not being able to kill the fish. It revealed a beautiful side of him. And in my 40s, when I told that story, the storyline was still the same. But it revealed to me that my father, who was not raised to express emotions in any way, shape, or form, he was a person of that generation and a family that didn't encourage that. That in fact, those fishing trips together were his way of expressing emotional intimacy and of our need to be together. But I could only see that in my 40s. He was doing the very best that he knew how to do with the tools he had available to him, and I love him for that. So, how do you tell, listen to, and share your story? In owning the fullness of your story with those companions of curiosity and awe, you begin to see your life through new lenses. Instead of only what you do, who you are in all of your wonder and your grittiness becomes cause for celebration. For celebration of your magnificence and your belovedness. Your story is beloved as you are. Allow it to invite you to live even more fully into the imagination of love. Love your story today. Love your story tomorrow. And love your story every day. How will you choose? Thank you. 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 Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Positive Spiritual Living Podcast, brought to you by Unity on the Bay, a spiritual community located in Miami, Florida. Unity on the Bay is supported by the generosity of its community. If you'd like to make a donation or learn more about Unity on the Bay, please visit unityonthebay.org. You can also follow Unity on the Bay on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for even more positive spiritual inspiration. Until next time, thanks for listening and many blessings. Namaste.